Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We'll call this meeting to order of the Delaware County Juvenile Detention Board of Managers for the month of August. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, our first item for today is public comment. And as we do with other county boards, there are two opportunities for public comment. The first at the beginning of the meeting is for agenda items only. There will also be an opportunity at the end of the meeting for anything that's really juvenile detention related, but not necessarily on the board, on the agenda for today. And we ask that anyone who speaks, if you could give your name and address, and please keep your comments to roughly kind of 3 minutes or less. Any comments from the public? Okay, hearing none. The next item is an approval of the minutes for the July meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from July.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any questions or comments before we vote? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The next item we have for today is an appointment of a solicitor. And so I guess, Bill, do you want to?
For the record, my name is William Martin. I'm solicitor for Delaware County. As I indicated at your meeting in July, in the intervening period since the July meeting, we followed a process of identifying several alternatives as solicitor, went through an interview process which included 5 of the members of the Board of Managers, had those meetings last week.
Recording in progress.
And
Recording stopped.
And have come before you with a recommendation that the board appoint Archer Law, and specifically partners Carlton Johnson, Shelly Smith, and Jeff Scott as solicitors on behalf of the board. I have known each of these individuals for over 20 years, starting with having practiced together with them in the City of Philadelphia Law Department. And they have more recently been of service to the county in the capacity as solicitor to the Jail Oversight Board. And I am pleased and very confident in providing the recommendation to the board. Shelly and Carlton are both with us today, and I'm going to invite them up to provide you a few minutes of background, their own background, their firm background, and why they think they would be good for you for this position.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shelly Smith. I'm pleased to be here this afternoon to introduce myself to those of you who don't already know me and Carlton and our firm. As Bill said, Carlton and I and Jeffrey Scott, who's not with us today, are partners at the Philadelphia law firm of Archer & Greiner. We're headquartered in Haddonfield, but we have a Philadelphia office, and Archer & Greiner is a full-service law firm that provides all manner of legal services for various public and private clients. Carlton and Jeffrey and I have worked together first in the city's law department and now at Archer for a total of almost 30 years. And throughout the course of our careers, and I'm going to let Carlton introduce himself to you, but throughout the course of our careers, we have really dedicated ourselves to corrections issues, juvenile justice issues, law enforcement issues, child welfare issues. We have many decades of experience now representing the Philadelphia prison system, the Department of Human Services in Philadelphia, which manages the juvenile justice system in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Police Department, and more recently, the Bucks County Prison, I served for a few years as the Montgomery County Solicitor, and so represented the Montgomery County Prison and their Department of Human Services. And so we have many years of experience handling the kinds of issues that your board is going to face in deciding how to go forward managing your juvenile detention system and integrating that with your criminal justice system. So that's just a brief overview. We're experienced trial lawyers as well as have decades of experience providing risk management counsel to our clients on all of these issues and many other issues. And, as a result of our experience, I think we have really been able to provide good counsel and develop a really good working relationship with the Jail Oversight Board, and we look forward to doing that for the Juvenile Detention Board of Managers as well. So I want to introduce Carlton.
Good afternoon. My name is Carlton Johnson. I know some of the folks in this room, and to the folks that I haven't met personally, at least before tonight, I can almost guarantee I have 1 or 2 degrees separation between you and somebody that I know. Some of you done a little bit of research. Some of you are on boards where I know virtually every one of your board members, which means I've been around for more than a minute. But I'm very pleased to be here. There is no higher calling than serving kids and delivering services, good, adequate, significant services to those kids. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to tour your facility, the closed facility at Lima, and this is a significant lift for Delaware County, but I applaud all of you for being on this board. It speaks volumes about who you are and what's important to you. As Shelly mentioned, we've had literally decades servicing clients, and it's not just in getting our team, you're getting 2 of the finest litigators, I will exclude myself, and Shelly Smith and Jeff Scott, in the entire city of Philadelphia. But you're not only getting that. Shelly's very modest. I'm one of her biggest fans because we've been associated professionally and personally for many years. But Shelly is the longest serving solicitor in the history of the city of Philadelphia, which means Bill understands what it means, the difficulty of the job of city solicitor, but to be the longest serving city solicitor in the history of the city of Philadelphia speaks volumes about who she is as a person and as a lawyer. We will deliver for you the service that you need, but not just in terms of the legal advice. One of the hallmarks of what we do for our clients is providing advice and counsel, right? The support that you need to do your job well. I'm gonna just leave it there because it's really difficult for me to speak in this mass, but I am really happy to be here and to be able to present myself and our team to you. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for all you're doing for these kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlton and Shelly. For those who were able to interview the candidates, for those who were not able to, any thoughts, questions, comments from the board members? And I should have mentioned, with us via audio for those who are watching or listening from home, we have Elaine Schaefer, and is Chris Eiserman on?
It doesn't look like he's on the Zoom.
Okay. But as you can tell, Elaine is on with us. So I just want to make sure that folks are aware that they're also here. Questions, comments,
I would
thoughts?
just add that I was on the interviewing committee, and Archer's got a really impressive background, and we have worked with them on the Jail Oversight Board with and seen their dedication to these issues and to their client. And I've also known these lawyers for quite some time and can vouch for how great they are as well. And really in the interviews, the people that we interviewed were very good, but I thought that Archer really brought a lot of expertise to the table that I don't think many firms can bring. So I was very supportive of our choice on that.
This is Elaine, and I want to just pile on to that to say that, in my view, there was really no contest. the depth of knowledge and experience from this group, which is far surpassed the other candidates, and also their level of familiarity with Delco and some of the very special issues that we have to deal with, that they can just really hit the ground running for us.
For my part, I will say, while I agree with Ms. Schaefer that there was a very clear number one, we also had two tremendous other candidates. And I think, having gone through the interview process, I was really impressed by the three finalists that were brought before us. I think where Archer really stands, far and above is in terms of the direct experience we have in terms of juvenile work. But I want to acknowledge that we had three really good folks to consider. And I think as we are at a point where we're basically starting this body from scratch, it to me felt like a really high priority item to have for us legal support. Not with all due respect to our county solicitor, Mr. Martin, it's great to have on board some folks who can be our legal support.
Mr. Martin only stretches so far with his staff, which is a lean group. So I agree, and I appreciate the work of Mr. Coyne and Mr. Martin getting us to this point.
Mr. Martin, just from just in the logistics of sorts, is there still a proposal, a contract that would be necessary to finalize? What would you be suggesting here for the board's consideration?
There has been a proposal made. I would suggest that you solicit a motion to retain Archer Greiner as board solicitor, subject to confirmation of written agreement at the discretion of the county solicitor.
Would someone like to make such a motion?
So moved. Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any comments, thoughts, questions before we vote? Okay, hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you so much, Team Archer. All right, the next item for today is a report on the current population. Ms. DiMatteo?
Good evening. So the current population, the copy that you received for week ending August 13th, I believe had 9 juveniles currently detained. As of today, we have 8 remaining in detention, and as of tomorrow, we will have 6, barring any new commits. But beds became available at some of the treatment facilities that we were waiting for, so those youth are moving on today, tomorrow, and Wednesday.
Okay, and you just a little bit more update on, so of the 6 that will remain, where will they be?
They will remain at, we have 2 at Bucks County, 1 at Montgomery County, 2 at Montgomery County, and 1 at Aspire, and 1 will remain at Chester County.
Sorry, so 2 Bucks, 2 Montco, 1 Aspire, and 1
Chester.
Okay. Questions, comments from the board? All right. Thank you, Ms. DiMatteo. Committee reports. We have first Human Resources. Ms. Schaefer, are you in a position to, as chair,
Sure.
give an update?
Sure. So we met to get this show on the road. And specifically for this subcommittee, the hiring subcommittee, the first and most important job that we do in a very time-sensitive way is get the process of hiring a director up and running. So we spent some time going over what that process will be, sort of identifying the fact that this needs to be a pretty unique hire. It's not just a facilities manager. This is really a policy position and a facilities management position, and someone who is willing to really take on a pretty Herculean task of reestablishing or reinventing our approach here in a progressive way. So with that in mind, we came up with a game plan, which I will outline to you. This current week, ending this Friday, internally, our personnel department has put together a first draft of a job description and brochure language. She has, that's Stacy, and she has already done that and circulated it among the committee. The hiring committee will give our comments by the end of this week. And then that, edited draft will go to the entire board. So expect to see that in your inbox, probably the end of this week or Monday next week. And we will be asking all of you to look it over, add your comments, your edits, your suggestions, and send it back, so that with the goal of having this finalized at the latter part of next week and ready to go out on the street. Now that brings us to where this is going to go. We had some discussion about, whether we wanted to try to market this within our own networks and within our personnel networks before going to a professional vendor who would help. So when this is finally put together, we will be circulating the final version for everyone to send out to their networks, or give the contact names to our personnel department so that they get it out. And we did feel that between all of the contacts of everyone on this board, we would have a pretty far reach, and we're hoping that gets us a lot of good resumes. We'll give that a timeline, and if we're not seeing a lot of resumes from that source, then we will look into hiring kind of a specialized vendor that would help us get it out to a wider audience. So that is basically it. The homework for this board will be to, when you get this draft version at the end of this week or early next week, please turn it around as quickly as you can with your comments and additions. And then when the final version is complete at some point at the latter point of next week, to send it out and get it out there.
Elaine, just a point of clarification. When you say kind of get it out there, it wouldn't just be for this board to consider amongst their own networks, but it would also be posted on the county's website and posted the way we always kind of post open jobs in the county?
Yes, absolutely. Yep, that's correct. And then looking forward, the hiring decision is actually this, a majority of this board. So when there is, some sort of culling through the hopefully many, many resumes we get, and it's whittled down to a manageable number, we discussed that it might be the best course to invite everyone to hear the finalists and meet the finalists, probably through Zoom. And then, so that everyone could make an educated vote when it comes time to hire.
Any questions from the board? Comments?
Sounds good. Sounds like a good plan.
Okay, great. All right, we'll move on to the Facilities and Contract Subcommittee. Ms. Williams,
Okay.
Vice Chair.
So the Facilities and Contracts Subcommittee met on the 11th. The members are the chair, vice chair, Dr. Taylor, Chris Eiserman. Dr. Taylor was not present at the meeting. So we spent a fair amount of time debriefing the visit at Lima and assessing, what we saw, giving our impressions. Then we talked a little bit about the scope and role. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit breathless in this mask. It's very, very hard to talk at length in it. We talked about the scope and role of the subcommittee as well. Also, the need to understand the needs of the young people who are still in the system, the young people who are expected to enter the system. That would probably require, we think, over some time, a formal needs assessment. We also talked about the need to come up with short-term solutions for the young people that are currently in the system beyond sending them to other counties. And then, of course, we're going to have to talk about long-term solutions, not only for the physical structure at Lima, but also the long-term needs for the young people. We talked a little bit about the need to identify potentially new provisional locations and providers, including considering whether or not some of these young people can be served in the community and not in alternative placements. And I think that's about it. Anything to add, Chair?
No, other than I think maybe to transition to discussing the informational meeting we had with regard to youth advocate programs.
Right. If you could start us off while I take a breath, that would be great, and I'll chime in.
Sure. So we had this board had an informational session at the end of last week with a group called Youth Advocate Program, who work with, I don't have the exact number, but something in the line of 200 different cities and counties across the country, offering an alternative to detention. So there's really, I'm going to kind of paraphrase what I heard, but really they offer kind of a range meeting the locale and the juvenile where the needs really are. Everything from something that's a higher touch point, such as ankle bracelets and something more secure, down to something that is much more kind of keeping the juvenile, in community but all of which really providing support from an educational perspective, from a mentorship perspective, and really kind of offering that alternative to detention. Go ahead.
Well,
please.
I'll jump in just to
Yeah.
remind folks that if you weren't able to participate on the Zoom call that I sent out the recording, you don't miss very much. We also had an overview at the very beginning from the defenders and the prosecutors just to explain how young people move through the system. One of the things that we discussed was that a common misconception about the juvenile justice system is that it's essentially the same as the adult criminal justice system, right? Except the defendants are younger. It's not the case. So if that's a misgiving that anybody on the board still entertains, we advise you to watch that Zoom call for that really important overview. You also will have gotten, I think, in advance of the Zoom call, a glossary that explained some of the terms that you're going to hear people use over and over again as we have our deliberations. So with that, I'm going to use some of those terms right now. So the one of the points that the chair was making about Youth Advocates Program is that they serve youth along the continuum of the juvenile justice system. So pre-adjudication youth, post-adjudication youth, youth who might otherwise go to placement, youth charged with misdemeanors, youth charged with serious offenses. They basically run the gamut. There's a little bit, we have a handout here from them. This is basically the offer that they've presented to the board. If there's more that you'd like to hear about Youth Advocates Program, we can certainly bring them back in. During the Zoom call, the board members present had, and also the prosecutors and defenders, had questions about the severity of offenses that were appropriate, I think, was, sort of the number one recurring questions. How severe are the offenses that youth advocate programs, will accept? They have a no refuse policy. So they accept every kid charged with any offense. An example they gave was a young person who was, correct me if I'm wrong, for the folks who were on the call, 19, charged with homicide or possession of a weapon, and that young person was able to participate in Youth Advocates Program. They're also one of the programs listed by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention as an evidence-based program. Evidence-based is sort of a term of art that gets used a lot in juvenile justice, but it's actually a standard. It's not just terminology. So Youth Advocates Program is one of relatively few in the country that have reached that threshold. What else is important to know about them? I think that's about it.
Yeah.
Dr. Taylor or anybody else?
We can all kind of chime in. I mean,
Yeah.
one thing that was mentioned was just from a budgetary perspective. I mean, the cost to detain currently is about $525 per day. The youth advocacy program is about $92 per day. So in addition to positive outcomes from a recidivism perspective and getting juveniles on a path toward getting out of the criminal justice system, there's also really a savings to the county that can really those are dollars that can be spent in more positive ways for the county. What else to really highlight? Dr. Taylor, did you anything else? I was going to say, furthering on what you said, Maria, we could certainly invite the youth advocacy program in to present in a public sense. I think we had the informational session. What we consider here is this something that this board would like to put to the solicitor to work out something that can really be considered by this board? And if there is support for that, we can provide direction to the solicitor to do so.
I would really like to meet and hear more about them. This is all new to me, and on the piece of paper it looks great, but I think we need to understand in great depth what making that decision would mean.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think we should have them in to hear more from them. I also, thinking about some of the things that the DA's office and others on the call were saying, just thinking about it as not like this is not the one size fits all. It's having options for where we go, and this is one of the options for us to consider or to also have if we were going to implement it.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to kind of make the same point, right? This doesn't necessarily have to be viewed as replacing detention. At the end of the day, I think this board's, at least in my view, this board's role is to really provide to the courts and the district attorney's office and the public defender's office, an array of, tools that can be utilized from a detention perspective, and so that whatever the courts at the end of the day see fit for a particular juvenile's case, that they have the best range of options to consider. And that's really what this is. This doesn't, necessarily replace having a local detention option.
And I heard from the informational session that that there may be pressure on the courts and for where people can go right now because of the situation. And there may be people that are not really getting anything at all. They're not being detained anywhere, but they're maybe being at home in custody. But maybe this program would also help some of those people to make sure that they can, get on the right path that will help them. So it sounded like there was there's some stress on the system that this might be a good alternative as well. So I think that would be, if we all need to hear that, I think I would be in favor of that. And I also would be interested at maybe in the next, maybe with our solicitors and all, but also how this is presented to the courts. Is this like an alternative that's there for them to, how does that work with that? We heard from the DA and the public defender, but it would also be interested to hear, whether how the courts would respond to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely support us recommending another opportunity to have them come in and speak more specifically as it relates to Delaware County and what we're trying to work towards. I heard a lot of general information, which was superior. It sounds like their program is very comprehensive. What I'd really like to hear is that they offer their support to probation and parole, to the courts at all hours, and can. That's very helpful. And it can certainly alleviate some of, hopefully, work and effort. But I see here on the top, it says Youth Advocate Program is offering an alternative to detention program. And so just again, making sure that we're really clear that we understand that if detention is needed, then it's needed, but how can this organization, if we choose, support even folks in the detention center? What I did hear is that they said they could go in the detention center and provide support, that it's not just an outpatient type of services. So I would recommend that we would move forward with, again, just another, more of a frank kind of conversation. I appreciated the info session. I heard the questions that were asked from the district attorney's office and the public defender's office, which made me think there's still a lot of questions that we need answers to, but it sounded like a superior organization.
Yeah, and to Controller Phillips's point, I think currently the impression that I think we all got from law enforcement was that there are currently juveniles who, the option is either being detained out of county under these existing contracts, or frankly, nothing. And maybe nothing it's too extreme of a statement, that through detention, through probation, there may be certain programs that are in place. But does this provide another arrow in the quiver, to use an expression, that the courts can consider?
And then the aspect of money, right? The budget is that they're offering this for, looks like 1 year, is that 1 year of funding? And I think we would need support in kind of looking at what then will be the expectation to continue this.
I think we should get some clarification with them, because I heard that they have $500,000
Okay.
earmarked for us,
Okay,
and based on if there were 15 slots in youth advocacy serving 60 days a year, that would translate to 500,000. But I didn't hear that necessarily terminate after.
okay,
That we would have for as long as it was
understood,
used.
okay.
But I could be wrong.
I would
That's
just
how I
be
understood.
fearful that we get this great program in, they offer the financial support, and we have to look forward to how then we sustain that.
Right.
So we don't set up our system.
Mr. Martin.
I just wanted to remind the board that one of the challenges that will need to be worked out. Of course, this is a new organization within the county structure, and part of the challenge will be understanding what the relationships are and where the lines exist between this board, between court probation, juvenile probation, and other organizations that already exist. And that's part of what your new solicitors will be helping you with. One of the things you might want to consider is if there's going to be a point where you're bringing these folks in to talk to you more, that and I wouldn't suggest it's being done on the fly, but with some notice, you invite Ms. DiMatteo or perhaps somebody else from her organization to give you a perspective of what currently exists in terms of alternatives to detention within the county. Because I'm guessing it was a bit of an overstatement saying it's this or nothing.
Right.
There are some other options, and it would be good to have that full perspective as you're considering whether this makes sense either through some collegial relationship or whether it's a option being presented to the courts, or how that's going to work out. Smart people will figure it out, but it's going to be the first time something like it's done in the county. So
what I'm hearing from the board is that there's general interest in continuing the conversation with youth advocacy, that there be some further work through the solicitor's office, through through juvenile probation, to understand if there really is a contractual relationship that makes sense and how that would fit in with what we currently have in the county.
I think also, in addition to that, I would like to add looking at the scale of use of the current options, because if there is a suite of alternatives to detention already in place, and they're not necessarily at full capacity, or may not be at full capacity, just trying to understand what the throughput is and whether or not they're adding capacity because we actually have more need, or they're just adding variety because the types of programs we have is, you know, not sufficient to meet every standard. So I think we do have to have a little bit of a broader focus before diving deeper into just what they provide in order to understand the needs a little bit better.
And can I suggest, though, that we also look at not just whether or not there are alternatives currently, but the efficacy of those alternatives, right? So, you know, there was a little bit of a question whether or not the facilities and contract subcommittee, that was a part of the scope of the board's powers, right? Do we get to look at contracts? Do we get to look at the performance of those contracts? Do we get to make decisions about whether or not those contracts are continued? So those are some of the, so I think it's great to have the menu, but if no one is using what's on the menu, or if they're using what's on the menu but to no effect, I think those are things that we would also need to know before we either accept or dismiss Youth Advocates Program.
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed.
All right, anything further on this topic? Okay. The next item we have is a discussion of the 2022 budget preparation. Mr. Martin, I don't know if you have anything to really.
Well, it is mainly to put it on your radar screen. We have the benefit of the county executive director here who may have some perspective. But what I wanted to alert you to is that the general benchmarks here are that each of the department budgets need to come through the budget department for presentation to the executive director by early October, with work then being done between the executive director and county council. So the county council is approving budgets in the first half of December. Here, of course, the extraordinary challenge is there's uncertainty regarding what the 2022 operations will consist of. And I don't think you all understand the problem. And, you know, certain assumptions are going to have to be made, and those assumptions are going to have to be incorporated into the county budget templates for purposes of submission. My suggestion would be that you establish either a small committee or one or two liaisons to work with Mr. Lazarus in the short term so that you can figure out sort of what you're doing. I mean, if you had a staff, you'd tell the staff person to figure it out, and the staff person would figure it out.
Can I ask a clarifying question? When you talk about budgets, you're saying there's a budget for Lima that you're saying we're assuming that budget will not be, I just want to.
Well, there are two relevant budgets.
Okay.
There is a budget, a 2021 budget for juvenile detention, which, to give you a magnitude, was $4,039,000.
Right.
And there was a separate budget that was identified as juvenile detention kitchen. The reason the kitchen is separate,
Is that a
I don't think
contract?
it,
Is
I don't
that
think,
a-
It's
No.
just a different.
it's a different budget. Juvenile detention kitchen, which was $513,000. So for last year, there was a total in the county budget of approximately $4,554,000, and that was prepared based upon a series of assumptions. For example, there were 65 employees that were budgeted for in 2021. There were only 42 of those positions were filled. You know, how many folks literally were working during first quarter of 2021? I don't have that number, but again, certain assumptions were made about how much those people were paid. That was one line item. And then the other line items were just assumptions were made, and it was approved by council back in December of 2020. So the same process is going to have to follow, and you'll need to decide in conjunction with first the executive director and then with the council members, what assumption do you want to make? Do you want to make the assumption that you're operating as if it operated in 2019? Do you want to make, you know, it's not for me to say, but I just, when I worked with Chairman Madden to put together this budget, to put together the agenda, I just thought it was relevant right now to be thinking about the fact that the board, in the absence of a staff, is going to have to work on that budget, and somebody's going to have to take presumably primary responsibility to work it out with county staff, essentially.
Well, so, and this might not be a question you can answer. I just want to throw it out there for, or council to sort of consider. So if the Juvenile Detention Board has a mandate to manage juvenile detention, does that also include alternatives to detention? Things like budgets for ankle bracelets, things like community-based programs. So I don't know that you can answer it now, but it's a question that keeps.
It's a fair question. I think it's a broader question. I think that is one that I would defer to your new solicitors to be thinking about. I mean, that's why they're here, to understand sort of what they need to respond to you about, and that's, I think, something they'll be talking about with you next month.
Yeah, I mean, I think these questions are why, getting a solicitor on board was so important, because there really is some murkiness with this being a newly formed board to understand where the lines are drawn between the responsibility of this board and the courts and other departments that currently exist. So I think, we are in some murky turf that needs to be sorted out.
And can we encourage folks to ask other questions while we have the actual attorneys here who are going to be tasked with answering them, that, if folks had other questions, I just suggest it might be a good time, not to hijack the meeting, but to, put them out there if they come to you.
Just on the terms of the budget, I'll share with the members of the board the current budget. It's just sort of a format. And if we do a subcommittee, because I need to do a budget for the executive director and it's in the works, I mean, I do one as an operating department. I'm willing to sit with others to help get it in some format for preparation for the executive director and the council. So as we move that way, but I will circulate what the existing budget is, so you can see the lines and how it's sort of set up. So that would be just I meant to do that. So I'll circulate that to everybody. I had one question on budget, and that was, and maybe for Danielle, is there some money that was kept back in order to pay for the children being detained now? Is that in the court's budget now? That did not come over to the Juvenile Detention Board, right?
Yes, so we had some money for private secure detention already in our budget.
Okay.
And then we transferred what we projected out for the year based on utilization in the first quarter of this year and utilization of the second quarter.
Okay.
For what we would need through the end of the year.
Okay.
And at this point, I think that we are still under that amount. But we did it based on what we had and not knowing when the center might open again or if it would open again
Right.
this year.
So there was a budgetary transfer for this year from the 4.5 million.
There was a request to transfer. I think it was finalized, but I'm not certain because it was an internal transfer as I understand it.
Yeah.
But maybe Mr. Lazarus can comment further on that.
Sure.
Good afternoon. This past, about a month ago, President Judge Kelly asked about transferring some of the funds from the juvenile detention budget to one of the lines that are in maintenance of juveniles. Right. And the reason for that was because they're having to pay through contracts and agreements to host the juveniles at other locations. So because both of those departments were within the courts, council action was not needed to make the transfer, and therefore that money was moved over from one account to the other.
Sorry, from which account?
It was from the juvenile detention to the maintenance of juveniles line.
So this budget that we're talking about,
in the current fiscal year, that money was moved.
it was transferred over to
That's correct.
other courts. Okay.
Before, both.
And that was just done for 2021.
Right, it was just this year due to the
Okay. So
extraordinary
again, I think that sort of
circumstances.
points to, we need to figure out where that, what falls under the category for 2022 of this budget. And, future contracts, do they occur through the courts? Do they occur through the budget here? I don't really know the answer to that, but I guess we're gonna have to figure that out.
So if I may, the opportunity that we face is to lay out the programs for next year that you would like to see to change the way we deal with juvenile justice in the county, and then work together to put a dollar sign on that. And then obviously the task before council is to balance all the needs of the county within the resources that are available. But as I tell all the operating entities, don't start by constraining yourself with what's in the budget this year. Figure out what it is that you would like to do, and then we can narrow down and put that into a form where the necessary resources that are reasonably available within the context of the county's whole budget can be budgeted for you. So it's, the dollars follow the programs, and I think that's really where I'd like to start with you, is figure out what outcomes you want to see, and then how do we fund that. And that also may include other sources of funds besides the county's general fund.
This is Elaine. Can I ask, I just heard Joanne offer to send around the detailed line item budget for this. But I don't know how helpful 2020 and 21 are going to be. 2020 was very obviously not a typical year, and 2021, it's been closed. So is there any chance that we could see 18 and 19 and to get a better idea of typically what this department has looked like?
Sure.
So I can work with Ms. Phillips
Yeah.
to put that together for you. But
Thank
again, realize that while we go back to a normal year for baselining, that's not a normal year of operations as you look forward as well.
I think they'll actually be pretty similar, but they'll be at least similar for categories, and then we're probably going to have other categories, or things might be, there's like a line item for contracted services, so it may be what can we put into that line item that addresses what do we need to contract for. So maybe ankle bracelets, I don't know. So, but I'll get together with Mr. Lazarus, and we'll make sure you get that.
Okay.
And I mean, just to be clear, not what we budgeted, but what we actually spent.
It's in SAP. It'll show what came out of each line item.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Anything else on this item? Right. The next item we had on the agenda was a discussion of presentations offered for future meetings. Mr. Martin, thoughts on, did you want to talk just sort of generally about approach, or any specific presentations that the board may want to see?
I mean, I think that's certainly for the board to make suggestions. I think that it was, I noted it in the context of the youth advocate program, and then I think we sort of elaborated on that earlier, that perhaps might be a benefit of a broader perspective on what's currently available from the county. And then I know at past meetings, suggestions were that other providers had made approaches, to folks on the board or folks dealing with broader issues of juvenile justice. And if there are those kinds of things that people would like to take the time to hear about, now would be the time to sort of get them on a list, so that people, Jim and I perhaps could do work identifying folks, trying to schedule them, et cetera.
Great. Well, as we said earlier, I think with further vetting of youth advocacy, if we get to a point where we think there is something that's worth considering, I think before any such vote would occur, I think it would be helpful to have them present publicly.
I have a question about some of the other programs we've talked about, other programs that already existed, and I'm sure we're working effectively, right? I don't know. And so we have the mental health system. I'd be curious to what was happening as it relates to the mental health programming, and if there is a provider, is the provider interested in coming to provide an info session? Do we look for a different provider? As well as the IU, I hear a lot about the educational services, but other than the schedule that I saw, and I'm sure it was comprehensive, I think we could get clarity on that would be really helpful.
So to turn that into maybe an action, do you think it would be worthwhile for next month's meeting to have, whether it's Ms. DiMatteo or someone else, present to the board what the sort of current programs that are being offered?
I think so, yeah, for the contracts, when we're talking about the
Yeah.
programming, the contracts that existed.
Ms. DiMatteo, I don't know if you want to, I don't want to put you on the spot,
No,
but something to consider.
I stayed. So I guess for the education, you'd probably want to reach out to the IU directly
Yeah.
and have them do a presentation on their education curriculum and programming that they offered at the detention center. As far as the mental health programs, we utilize Magellan, soon to be CCBH. I can't think of the full name off the top of my head. We're still learning about their process and referrals, but we understand that all of our services and providers will remain available to us. We use all of the community offered programs for those youth in the community. So for some perspective, we have about 2,300 cases active, about 1,800 juveniles in the community, of which we probably have monitors, different types of monitoring, different types of programming. So for the mental health services that were provided specifically in the detention center, that at the time was child guidance. Before that, it was now Merrick, but I can't think of who they.
Northwestern Human Services.
Northwestern Human Services.
Is there some way we can get sort of all of the programs, both in the community and formerly in Lima, who contracted with the county, and uptake of those programs? Like how often were they used, for which kids, and then any outcomes data that those programs have, so we know whether or not there's any sense that they're actually working.
I'll take a look at the request and the scope and see what we can pull together or what's immediately available.
And also I know I'm adding to this list, I'm so sorry. And also the actual contracts, if we could have them, would be sort of useful.
Yes, some of the services were contracted services. Many of the services we use through the public insurance benefit for the youth in the community. So they can go to Marquis, Crozier. For example, all drug and alcohol that's inpatient or outpatient level is all done through the insurance, is navigated through the insurance directly. So we're not
Okay.
paying for those services.
Okay.
We pay for additional support services through the court or through probation. So, monitoring services, curfew check, community management.
So when you say through the insurance, what does that mean? I don't know that.
So for example, if a young person needs outpatient drug and alcohol, we would get them certified through an
Yeah.
outpatient provider, and it would be covered through their insurance, through Magellan,
Okay.
presently Magellan.
Their insurance being they're the kid, assuming the kid is insured by
Either
a
public or
parent
private, depending on
or
what's
public.
available.
Okay.
So if they don't have private insurance, that's where Magellan kind of steps in. Magellan
Right.
is currently the.
Right, and then there's county funding available, as you know, through Human Services, to cover a certain portion of the time that might not be covered in the
Got
early
it.
part of their.
So I think that's the piece that we would want to know about, the county portion. So whatever costs us money would be the piece. So even if for someone who's underinsured, the county provides,
That's done through our Human Services
that's
block
fine.
grant.
oh, okay.
So
Got it.
there's funding streams that support our services as well as the county generally.
And just to
Are
be clear,
they-
that funding is actually reimbursed by the state.
Yes.
And that's a separate path.
I was about
Yes.
to say, is that
Okay.
somebody else's purview?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's not county tax dollars that
Right.
pay for that.
Well, an education about that would be helpful for me too. So, thank you.
Yeah, I think that would give us a really great place to start.
Yep.
To determine what's working well, what we can use. We have a lot of rich resources here in Delaware County. We can't assume that all of them were not effective. I mean, we have, kids doing well in the community. And so the trauma work that I heard that was being done, I understand it could be through Child Guidance Resource Center, but I think having more understanding of the who and how they got referred. And my understanding, Danielle, am I correct, that part of supervision is the treatment component?
Correct. If you're adjudicated delinquent and found to be in need of treatment, supervision, and rehabilitation, then your disposition, along with your case plan or treatment plan, is all part of providing those services. So there's some assessments that are done both before and after, and then plans that are put together with the child and the family and other support services that are involved, whether it's CYS, mental health services, or other child welfare services available to the child and the family.
Thank you.
Mr. Lazarus.
Sure. For the board members, I will also ask that Ms. Garrison be available and come and talk about the programs through Human Services at your next meeting as well. It is a bit of a tangled web, and it's hard to understand, but it is an opportunity for her to talk about the services that we offer through Human Services and how they support young adults who are in our care.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Ms. Garrison, Sandy Garrison is the Director of Human Services for the county.
Is that through, and pardon my ignorance, is that through the Office of Behavioral Health?
The Office of Behavioral Health
Part
is
of-
a
part
part
of
of
it.
Human
Which
Services.
Thank you, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else before we move on to any new business? All right. Is there any new business to add? Ms.
I
Phillips?
had a question. Since touring the facility, I had two questions, and maybe Mr. Lazarus, you might need your help. And maybe there's work going on already, but there's cleanup needed of documents and papers that were left because they were forced to be left from the investigation or whatever was going on there. And then two, just the maintenance of the building. I know Park Police were going through it and that security seemed good, but I'm just wondering about like systems and just maintaining the building so we don't see waste go to the building. We just all know the buildings that get shut down or no one's in, they tend not to get better, they get worse. So I just wanted to know I didn't know if the facilities people had a chance to talk about that at all, but I didn't know those two things were on my mind since our visit.
It's a good question.
So the documents that are there, we can certainly provide the help to get them in order, but the disposition of them is really beyond, a maintenance task. So we need some advice as to how to process those. The building itself, when I walked through, it seemed to be in pretty good shape, and we'll continue to maintain it so it's functional. And then just to expand on that, tomorrow evening, council will consider some on-demand architectural engineering services. So once the path forward is kind of determined, we can get started pretty quickly on whatever modifications to the building that might be needed. I'm sorry. So I share your concern about making sure we preserve the building so that it doesn't fall into a state of disrepair.
Yeah, and I guess on our tour, it looked like there was some, like up in there were documents that could be very confidential or have HIPAA implications. So I don't really know what services we would need to contract to get someone in there. I mean, it seems to me we might need to contract with someone that's under confidentiality to put things back in a folder till we know what to do with them. I don't know how that, I don't know. Without a director, I don't know, but I don't know that the stuff should sit around on a table in places.
Well, who takes custody? And I
Exactly.
heard when we were
Right.
there that there are providers that are outside who they may be the documents of those providers who would be responsible ultimately to have custody of them. So, a common folk can't go in and take custody of the confidential information, but they, understandably so, there was a search warrant done, it was clear, but they're all out. And so just to preserve.
Maybe they even get locked up into one of the offices or something and put under lock and key till we know what to do with them.
Yeah,
But-
I think there might be a useful outreach by our new solicitors to the Attorney General's office, just to understand what we can and can't do
Yeah, good
to
point.
make sure that, sensitive documents are being secured appropriately and what we can do to maintain the building while there is this ongoing investigation.
Good point.
Does that seem right?
Mm-hmm.
Any other new business? All right, we are now at the second point for public comment. I'm not sure if there's any members of the public who have anything to say. All right, hearing none. Any other board member comment for today? All right, well, hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.